Today, I want to talk about something that 4.4 million high school students, not one with the same story or circumstance, go through each and every year. Junior year for many is defined by and encapsulated by standardized tests. It's the year before students apply to college, stack up on AP courses, generally experience the most stress, and after all, take the infamous SAT or ACT. As a current junior in high school, I can attest just how time-consuming studying for these tests can truly be. After studying for 2 to 3 hours and coming home sweaty from soccer practice, oftentimes the last thing that I want to do is sit down and take an ACT reading section. But nonetheless, no matter how often students huff and puff and complain about these tests, it seems like they're not going anywhere for now. But I'm not here to talk about just how annoying these tests are or about how little they actually test, but rather something deeper. I'm here to talk about the disparities, the inequality that students face when taking them, and the profound impacts that has on the world around us. To start off with, last year alone, over 4 million high school students took either the SAT or ACT alone. This test allows colleges to compare students from different schools, having different teachers, from urban New York to rural Kentucky. Without it, there are few ways of fair comparison. This is why many people like to call standardized tests the great leveler, as it creates an equal playing field for everyone. This is also why college admissions play such a large role on standardized tests. It's one of the few levelers that actually exists. But are these ways of comparison really fair? Are standardized tests all they're hyped up to be? Are these tests helping all students get into college, or just some of them? Let's take a look at 17-year-old Marquise, a bright, straight-A student from Chicago. Marquise works 2 part-time jobs just to help his family pay rent. He does everything he humanly can just to make sure there's food on the table every night for his other 5 siblings. Last fall, Marquise, in addition to millions of other high schoolers, buckled down and got ready to take the ACT. But he faced a wide variety of challenges ahead of him. For starters, him nor his family could afford the expensive prep books, the expensive prep courses that guaranteed high scores. Furthermore, he attended a poorly funded public high school, a school whose curriculum did not match the content that appears on these tests. However, these obstacles seem minute compared to the biggest obstacle he faced. Because when it came time to register for the test, Marquise nor his family could afford the $35 it took just to register. However, Marquise is not the only one. He's one of hundreds and thousands of individuals across the globe that face these same obstacles and disadvantages when taking standardized tests. Now let's look at the other end of the spectrum. Let's take a look at Brian. Brian was on a wait list for an ACT tutor for over 2 years. A tutor that charges $300 per hour, but correspondingly guarantees high scores. Furthermore, Brian attends a well-funded private high school, a high school that teaches above and beyond the content taught and tested on standardized tests. Brian might not be smarter than Marquise, but he's given an inherent advantage. Valerie Strauss, an educational columnist, and hundreds of other activists know this story all too well, leading them to argue that these tests are anything but fair. As Valerie Strauss furthers, a repeated pattern has emerged from this test, and it's that students of low socioeconomic status, and disproportionately students of color, face widespread disadvantages when taking them. As Valerie furthers, wealthy parents can afford learning opportunities, tutoring, good school districts that allow their students to excel when taking these tests. That's why it shouldn't be surprising that a 2018 study tells us that the poorest communities, on average, have the lowest test scores. And furthermore, that students of color do, on average, 100 points worse on the SAT than their white counterparts. It's obstacles like these that are leading more and more people to wake up and realize that we need to abolish these practices, abolish standardized tests. However, it's clear that the disparities, the inequalities students face when taking these tests go far beyond just a score, far beyond just a day in their high school career. It affects the rest of their lives. As I mentioned before, standardized tests play a huge role in college admissions. And since we know wealthier students on average do better on these tests, we likely find that more of these students attend and encompass the student body at top universities. And that's exactly what we're seeing. In 5 of the 8 Ivy League universities, more students attend from the top 1% in income than the bottom 60% of income combined. And this trend continues and stays true for 38 colleges across America, every single one of them being a top 50 university. This inequality stems far beyond a score. It affects these students' likelihood at attending elite universities. But furthermore, 50% of senior executives at Fortune 500 companies came from the top 5% of income as children. These disparities, this inequality, is affecting and molding the rest of these students' lives. It's this inequality, this divide, that is continuing to divide and polarize our country. In Lincoln's famous House Divided speech, he argues it was the inequality, it was the racial divide at the time that was endangering the sovereignty of the country. And still today, we're still metaphorically a house divided over the same issues of inequality yet again. Inequality certainly takes different forms than it did in the 1800s, but the impacts are just as real and just as profound. Standardized tests and the disparities and inequalities students face when taking them are one of the countless forms of hidden inequality embedded in today's society. So I want to ask you one question. Where are we leading the next generation of students, of thinkers, of believers by standing by and emboldening practices embedded with inequality? As a current teenager in today's society, in today's generation, I know just how important these issues have become to our generation. It is, at the end of the day, our generation's job to come together and fight inequality. In former Yale professor William Dershowitz's book, he argues that youth will become the future educators of the world. And that it is our responsibility to take on that role as a generation to fight inequality and to fight racism. It has to be our generation that is fueled by meaningful change, brave enough and bold enough to challenge the status quo, fight against social and political norms when knowing we're fighting for what's right. And this change can come in many different ways. The University of California school system officially just went test optional after one individual, Kawika Smith, sued the school system, arguing the discrimination embedded in these tests. It took one individual, one heart, to make dramatic and meaningful change. Imagine what we could do together. Therefore, I know it will be our generation to come together, to unite the house by fighting inequality. Thank you.